What is tip number 2, please?
Tip number 2 is another hard one. A hard one tip. Okay. All right. It's tip number 2 is the best kind of feedback, in my experience, the best kind of feedback to offer a student or a class when there's mistakes or when there's errors or when there's things that they haven't done right. The best type of feedback is a learning activity. And it's not even close. It's much better than written feedback on a page of their work. That's my in my experience, learning activities are better feedback than writing comments on a page, and it's not even close. How's that?
I like it. I love nothing more than a kind of definitive answer. This is good, Michael. Give me some examples of this, how you might use this, and to sell your argument.
Absolutely. Well, I started reading research. I've been a teacher since 2010, and in my own way, I was reading research back then. I think I ramped up over the first couple of years. I went from reading like Paul Tufts books. I don't know if you know who he is. Pop psychology, mindset things. And I kind of ramped up to like finding my way around research papers and stuff. And then, I said, I'm going to understand now. I want to understand all the research about feedback, and I want to think about, I know I could be doing better, so I want to understand this. So at first, my project was, I'm going to learn how to write the best comments ever on pages. I'm going to understand how to take a stack of quizzes or a question that I've collected from the class, and I'm going to write the thing that'll work. And I will write it on that page, and it will lead to learning. That's what will happen. Because I'd read that feedback was immensely impactful and super important, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to do the thing that is the best. I wanted to master that part of teaching. It would lead to better learning. It would turn mistakes into learning. And so I started reading, and I started looking for things, and I started writing them, and I would take a lot of time, and I'd write a lot of comments, and inevitably they'd still go in the garbage. The comments on the papers after I was done, students wouldn't always read them carefully, and I said, why is that? Why is this at all? And then I kept reading research, and I read Dylan Williams writing about research and formative assessment. I know he's a friend of the podcast, and he pointed me to Kluger and Denise's writing about research, writing about feedback, and from them I got really something that what I took to be like a very direct question about feedback, one that made me basically give up on my project of writing comments, because the question was, how does feedback work, and how could it work, really, right? You don't usually teach a class the first time by writing comments on the side of the page, right? You don't do that. I don't do that. I don't say, okay, class, here's some comments. Here's a piece of paper that says how you're supposed to do this. You don't do that. I don't do that. It's a bad idea. No one would pay attention to that. So what are you doing? So you're either, Kluger and Denise said, in terms of understanding feedback, and really they were trying to understand why feedback sometimes backfires so often in so many of the research studies that were done at the time, and why it works sometimes. And what they ended up saying, which was very clarifying to me, is like, look, and it's funny what you pick up from research, right? This is not the point of their paper, but this is what I took out of it. They said, conceptually, you're either teaching by giving feedback. That's one thing that you could be doing, providing new information to students, helping them understand something they didn't understand before, or you're motivating them. Literally, what else is there? Well, what else could you be doing when you're writing a comment on a page? So your comment on the page must either be teaching kids something, or motivating them to study harder or to pay better attention or something like that. And I'll say, just on the side, there is a third purpose that comments can have, I think, which is you're showing that it's not directly tied to learning, right? You're showing, I read your paper. I value what you did. You put in a lot of time to this project, or you wrote this essay, and I read it and I valued it, and there's good things here, and there's things that could be better. But we're learning. It could have a different role, is what I'm trying to say. But if it's just about teaching and learning, it has to be There's not much else. You're either providing instruction or motivating. And I asked myself, what am I doing with these comments? And it wasn't good instruction. And it was clearly unmotivating. So I said, what else can I do? And then I started thinking, wait a second, how do I teach? How do I teach? If it's instruction or motivation, I don't really know how I motivate. I don't have systematic thoughts about that, but I do have a pretty clear idea of how I teach things. So I said, okay, so what do I have to teach? And that changed things for me. Then I changed the questions I was asking. When I saw a pile of quizzes with mistakes, I started asking myself, what could I teach? What is the thing here that, and there's always something to teach, more or less. So I started looking at the kids' papers, their quizzes, their homework, whatever it happens to be, and I started looking at it for the eye of, I would like to do a follow-up lesson tomorrow to give feedback. I would like to. I guess I would also, okay, I would prefer if everything was perfect and they understand it and then they're like, oh, you're the best teacher in the world, we love you. Yeah, fine, but realistically, I'd love to teach a follow-up lesson the next day with a learning activity of some kind that could be easily modifiable, so I can get like mega specific about what I need to teach, and I would teach it. So that changed what I started doing. I started looking at these papers and I tried to get very specific. The assumption being that they understand some things. I shouldn't just repeat the instruction I did before. I tried to focus in on, say, okay, they know how to solve Pythagorean theorem problems in these cases. Perhaps, this is a common thing that I think a lot of teachers experience, perhaps when the hypotenuse is missing. But a lot of their mistakes are when a leg is missing. They still square both sides and add them. It's maddening. So that's the thing that they need to learn. So my lesson tomorrow will be a quick lesson about that. And there are easily modifiable formats. Worked examples are one of them. There's others too, where I've got instructional activities that I can do and I can just kind of like slot in the thing I need to teach. And I started doing that and I started seeing learning more, which made sense because I was now doing teaching the way I usually do it, not the kind of weird way where you kind of write down in a sentence 40 times and hope the kids learn from that sentence. And I think that's much better. And you can't crumple up and throw out my lesson because you're there for it. You can't throw it on the floor. I don't have to pick up my lesson that I've taught, from the garbage and look at my carefully crafted comments, like sitting with a very sad face, like the toys in Toy Story at the end in the garbage, as kids left the room. So it's a win-win.
Right, Michael. Well, I've got one reflection and then one question for you on this one. So my reflection is, when I read similar research, I thought, right, if I improve my written comments to set kind of follow-up work for kids to do, almost like come up with a worked example for one of the questions they've got wrong in their book and then set them almost like a your turn, that would be great. The problem is it took so long to do and still some of the kids weren't particularly engaged in doing it. So just like you, I thought, okay, I need to scrap this. It's not working. So let's go to what we probably call in the UK like a whole class feedback model. So we look for these kind of common trends and issues within a set of assignments or homework, and we address the big ones in front of the whole class. But I'll tell you the kickback I always get on this, Michael, when I start talking about this, and I'm hoping you can answer this for me, is what do you do about the kids who don't need that whole class feedback? What do you do about the kids who have nailed their assignment, they've got it all sorted, they're ready to move on, and yet you are spending valuable lesson time with the rest of the class? Well, what's your response to that?
Well, how much time are we devoting and what are we doing is, I guess, the question. When I have done this, what I've tried to do is not repeat instruction, but to give more specific instruction on a more specific aspect of the mathematics, or whatever the skill happens to be, right? My model for this is that we're always trying to teach. I'm tracing a circle, a blob area with my pencil, right? We're always trying to nail an original instruction, we're trying to teach kids a skill of a constrained area, and it's not the biggest we could possibly do, and it's not the smallest either, because we're trying to find the right size skill to teach, we don't want them to just be able to write one kind of essay, one kind of paragraph, one kind of sentence, be able to solve one type of equation, multiply specific types of numbers, but we don't want it to be everything. We're teaching a certain thing. So we guess on that size. And the way I think about it is sometimes what's revealed on one of these things is that we guess too big, too small. We taught most of the territory, but not a little corner of it. And very frequently we've taught, you're trying to, the kind of weird thing about teaching, I guess, is you try to teach a blob by teaching specific points inside. You try to build this territory out from the inside, usually. So you'll learn certain things, reflect on why they're true, and you're kind of hoping to sketch out this area, but you inevitably fail or leave areas blurry. And that's what I'm trying to do in the follow-up thing. So I don't think of it as repeating any instruction. I think of it as new instruction that is fleshing out an area that we hadn't really properly fleshed out before. And so I think that, and I can get on your podcast and say anything, and you have to either believe me or not, right? I could say, like, there's no reason why you have to believe me when I say, I think it's worked out okay with my students. They don't seem bored, even the kids who got it right. But I think I can tell a story about why those kids don't react in that way, why they're engaged as they are, usually. And it's because what's happening when I say, teach a worked example lesson about some more specific area. Kids are having a chance to explain why something's wrong, apply, their knowledge to a specific type of question that maybe they already know how to do, but we haven't featured it in the lesson yet, really, because of how that was revealed by it'd be a little bit weird if not weird, I guess this happens all the time, but I wouldn't devote this kind of, I wouldn't choose to do it again if it was just a clone of something we've done before. I'm always trying to hit it in a slightly different way, have a different kind of learning activity than one we did before. So that's the hope. I don't know. I think it usually works out. But the other thing is, if you keep it short, there's only so long that kids can get bored for. So, if this is a 10, 15-minute activity that you're doing to give feedback on a crucial matter, then how bad can it be?
I completely agree, Michael. I'm always intrigued by this. The more I work with teachers, the more I hear differentiation being used as a way to scrap a load of really good practices. Like, because it's perhaps not suiting the needs of every single child, well, we can't do it then. So that gets kind of thrown out the window. But like you, if it's a relatively short time and it's not reteaching, I think it's super powerful. I'm really worried about this kind of almost it's like a game. As soon as you say something, people just throw about differentiation, and you're like, all right, well, I can't do anything about that because it's impossible to differentiate perfectly. And it concerns me. So I'm just interested to get your take, but that's great.
Yeah, it's interesting, because if it's a game, it's always possible to do that, right? It's always like, yeah, exactly. I found it. What about kids?
Exactly.
From New Jersey? They already know. They already know this bridge. I don't know anything about New Jersey. New Jersey, for those in the UK, is right next to New York. It's where Bruce Springsteen is from, and other musical acts subsequent to Bruce Springsteen. And it's very close to New York. I'm not actually as provincial as many New Yorkers because I'm from the Midwest of the country. It's just a little bit of American spice, just to give some color to the
we like it. But it promotes the idea we're a global podcast, Michael, so I like that.
Oh, that's great. The pushback I get from teachers when I talk about feedback is typically, what do you do when there's a million mistakes across a long test?
Yeah.
And there's no great answer to that, because it's not easy to give feedback on a big test with a big exam that's got like 40 questions on it and 5 kids got this one wrong. That's a harder question for me because I kind of want to say, well, there's no good way. It's hard. Like, how are you going to figure out what to focus on? There's things you can do, but your learning activity needs to get much cleverer because it's much more difficult to give feedback on something so varied. So that when you started, I thought you were going to tell me that people think but they don't.
It's on my list as well. But when you're back on in a couple of years' time, when I start having to re-invite guests on, Michael, you can answer that question. That'd be fantastic.
Okay.
All right, Michael. What?